In the serene outskirts of Millbrook, cradled just beyond the lively metropolis of Hartford, Connecticut, a monstrous act disrupted the tranquil suburban facade. On a cool autumn day in September 2018, the lifeless form of 17-year-old Sarah Thompson was found in the forest adjacent to her family residence. The grisly spectacle jolted the neighborhood, causing inhabitants to barricade themselves indoors and murmur about the murderer lurking in their midst. Veteran detective Michael Carter, a perceptive and tenacious investigator from the Hartford Police Department, was summoned to spearhead the inquiry. Armed with his keen instinct and unyielding commitment, Carter plunged into the convoluted mesh of falsehoods and treachery enshrouding Sarah's homicide. Unbeknownst to him, this case would test his beliefs and compel him to grapple with humanity's bleakest facets. As the probe progressed, initial doubts were cast upon Sarah's stepmother, Amanda Wilson. Their tumultuous bond had been an open secret among the neighbors, and Amanda's ostensible envy of her stepdaughter appeared to furnish a rationale. However, beneath the veneer of this seemingly simple case, a tangled narrative of duplicity, clandestine affairs, and lethal repercussions awaited. At the epicenter of this calamity was Robert Wilson, Sarah's stepfather, a distinguished entrepreneur and community stalwart. Robert posed as the bereaved paternal figure, comforting his spouse through their mutual grief. Yet, as Detective Carter would soon unearth, Robert's meticulously crafted guise shrouded a nexus of deception that would eventually precipitate his ruin. This account recounts a slaying that rent a family asunder, defied a sleuth's intuition, and disclosed the catastrophic outcomes of unbridled yearning and disloyalty. It stands as a bone-chilling caution that occasionally the most menacing beasts conceal themselves in broad daylight, donning the mask of normality within our very own localities. Sarah Thompson, a radiant and hopeful adolescent, met a heart-rending demise merely weeks shy of her 18th birthday. Born to single-parent Amanda Thompson in 2001, Sarah blossomed into a brilliant and inquisitive girl, perpetually eager to absorb knowledge and investigate her surroundings. From her formative years, Sarah demonstrated a fervor for art and literature. Her educators frequently lauded her ingenuity and profound compositions, earmarking her as a pupil with immense potential. Sarah's artistic creations embellished her high school corridors, and she had lately ventured into photography, capturing the splendor of the natural world in the forest bordering her dwelling, the very woods that would ultimately serve as the backdrop for her premature end. Despite her scholastic and artistic triumphs, Sarah's domestic life was far from harmonious. At the tender age of 12, her mother wed Robert Wilson, a thriving entrepreneur in the locality. Initially, Sarah appreciated the constancy that Robert introduced to their existence, yet the rapport between the stepfather and stepdaughter deteriorated as Sarah transitioned into adolescence. Compassionate, yet resolutely self-reliant, Sarah's peers and schoolmates depicted her as an advocate against intimidation in school. The bond between Sarah and her mother, Amanda, had forever been intricate. For years, Sarah had been the focal point of Amanda's universe as an only offspring. However, Robert's entrance induced a transformation in their relationship. Sarah frequently perceived that her mother favored her recent nuptials over their maternal connection, resulting in recurrent disputes and emotional detachment. In the preceding months before her demise, Sarah's loved ones observed an alteration in her conduct. She grew more reserved, dedicating additional time to solitude in her chamber or meandering in the forest with her camera. Her artwork reflected somber subjects, and her typically immaculate academic performance started to decline. Sarah's closest companion, Emily, recalled Sarah appearing preoccupied and anxious. Yet, when questioned, Sarah would dismiss apprehensions with a feigned smile and a diversion. Unbeknownst to anyone, Sarah had chanced upon a revelation that would ultimately prove deadly. Driven by her pursuit of authenticity and innate inquisitiveness, she had unearthed a truth that someone was prepared to eliminate to conceal. Sarah Thompson's burgeoning life, brimming with potential, was extinguished just as she approached the brink of maturity. In her wake, she left behind a grieving community and an enigma that would rattle Millbrook to its foundation. Robert Wilson, then 45 years old at the time of Sarah's homicide, embodied the quintessential suburban triumph. An appealing and esteemed financial consultant, Robert had established a prosperous enterprise in Hartford, overseeing the fortunes of some of the city's most opulent inhabitants. His refined appearance and self-assured demeanor rendered him a natural head figure in the neighborhood, participating in the regional chamber of commerce and mentoring juvenile soccer. Hailing from a blue-collar family in Boston, Robert had ascended the social hierarchy through an amalgamation of allure, intellect, and relentless drive. He crossed paths with Amanda Thompson at a philanthropic event in 2012, and their passionate romance culminated in matrimony a mere 8 months later. To onlookers, Robert seemed to be the quintessential spouse and stepfather, bestowing stability and fiscal assurance to Amanda and Sarah. Nonetheless, concealed beneath the facade of triumph and admiration, Robert nurtured obscure secrets and unsatisfied aspirations. His union with Amanda had swiftly waned, and he found himself captivated by the allure of a clandestine liaison. For the past year, Robert had been entangled in a fervent affair with Elena Gonzalez, the spouse of his adjacent neighbor and confidant, David. Robert's liaison with Elena transcended mere physical allure. He felt invigorated in her company, experiencing a bond he thought he had never established with Amanda. The clandestine lovers would rendezvous in secrecy, pilfering moments of ardor while their partners were occupied at work or engaged in chores. Robert became adept at deception and manipulation, maintaining his duplicitous existence by misleading those around him. As Sarah approached her late adolescence, Robert found her presence increasingly disconcerting. Her astute nature and sharp eye for particulars instilled in him the fear that she might expose his unfaithfulness. He began evading one-on-one time with his stepdaughter, fabricating excuses to skip family suppers and gatherings. Acquaintances and associates portrayed Robert as captivating and magnanimous, always prepared with a quip or a helping hand. David Gonzalez, oblivious to Robert's treachery, frequently extolled him as the ideal neighbor and companion a man could desire. Robert's clients had implicit faith in him, captivated by his self-assured guarantees and remarkable accomplishments. Nevertheless, those who knew Robert intimately detected an underlying sentiment of discontentment. His assistant at the financial institution remarked on his mounting irritability and inattentiveness in the months preceding Sarah's demise. Robert's long-standing college companion, Mark Stevens, observed that Robert appeared to be living precariously, as though perpetually glancing over his shoulder. No one could have imagined that beneath Robert Wilson's meticulously constructed persona lurked a man capable of unspeakable deeds, driven by desperation to safeguard his secrets and preserve his lifestyle at any expense. The gruesome revelation occurred on the morning of September 15, 2018, when a jogger on his regular path through the woods behind the Wilson residence stumbled upon the corpse of Sarah Thompson, partially hidden beneath a heap of foliage and branches in a crude attempt at concealment that barely disguised the horrendous nature of the crime. Detective Michael Carter arrived at the scene within an hour. His seasoned gaze registered every detail. Sarah's body bore evidence of a savage altercation. Contusions blemished her arms and face, and defensive injuries on her hands suggested she had fought ferociously for her life. The cause of death was instantly evident: a jagged laceration across her throat, likely inflicted with a serrated edge. As the forensics team scrutinized the area for evidence, Carter noted several crucial particulars. Sarah's camera, which companions asserted she always carried on her woodland explorations, was absent. Drag marks and disrupted flora implied the body had been relocated from the initial crime scene, possibly in an attempt to conceal it from immediate detection. Most revealingly, there were no indications of sexual assault, prompting Carter to speculate that the motive for the murder was personal rather than opportunistic. The savagery of the assault indicated a crime of passion, someone who was familiar with Sarah and had been driven to a moment of uncontrollable fury. As the murder's details circulated, the formerly serene community of Millbrook plunged into an atmosphere of apprehension and mistrust. Neighbors who had once left their entrances unsecured now diligently verified their alarm systems. Parents confined their offspring indoors, and the woods that had previously served as a recreational area became a restricted zone, sealed off with yellow police tape. Detective Michael Carter, a seasoned investigator with 20 years of service at the Hartford Police Department, assumed control of the inquiry with resolute determination. Renowned for his thorough methodology and uncanny knack for discerning connections overlooked by others, Carter had resolved some of the department's most perplexing cases. Standing in the Wilsons' living room, examining the family portraits on the mantelpiece, he recognized that this case would challenge him like no other. The initial 48 hours of the investigation unfolded in a flurry of action. Carter and his colleagues conducted preliminary interviews with relatives, acquaintances, and neighbors. Sarah's academic records were inspected, her social media profiles analyzed, and her activities in the days preceding her demise were meticulously reconstructed. Robert Wilson, appearing profoundly shocked, furnished a comprehensive account of his location on the night of the homicide. He asserted that he had been working late at his office, a claim substantiated by security footage and his assistant's statement. Amanda Wilson, still visibly upset, struggled to maintain her poise during her interview. She conceded that she had quarreled with Sarah the afternoon before her vanishing, but maintained it was merely typical mother-daughter discord. As Carter probed further, a portrait surfaced of a household rife with discord. Neighbors recounted frequent disagreements between Sarah and her mother, their loud voices frequently audible across well-groomed lawns. Sarah's closest companion, Emily Chen, disclosed that Sarah had been progressively unhappy at home, feeling confined and misunderstood. The forensics team's preliminary discoveries raised more questions than answers. Trace evidence discovered on Sarah's attire didn't correspond to samples obtained from Robert or Amanda. The murder weapon, likely a hunting knife or comparable serrated blade, remained undiscovered despite an exhaustive search of the Wilson property and adjacent areas. A turning point emerged when Carter questioned Elena Gonzalez, the Wilsons' next-door neighbor. Elena, visibly anxious during the conversation, mentioned that she had witnessed Sarah arguing with Amanda in the driveway the day before her disappearance. More intriguingly, Elena inadvertently revealed that Amanda had always appeared envious of her daughter's youthfulness and attractiveness. This information, combined with the turbulent domestic environment and Amanda's questionable alibi for the night of the murder, prompted Carter to concentrate his investigation on Sarah's mother. He hypothesized that accumulated resentment had eventually reached a boiling point, culminating in a confrontation that resulted in a fatality. As the inquiry entered its second week, Carter felt assured they were pursuing the correct lead. He secured a warrant to examine Amanda's personal effects and communications, hoping to discover the decisive piece of evidence that would unravel the case. However, a persistent doubt lingered in Carter's consciousness. Something about Robert Wilson's composed demeanor and flawless alibi struck him as excessively convenient and tidy. Little did Carter suspect that his instincts were guiding him toward a reality far more ominous than he could have envisioned. As the investigation advanced, all indications appeared to implicate Amanda Wilson as the primary suspect in her daughter's homicide. Detective Carter, steered by the evidence at hand, commenced constructing a case against the 42-year-old homemaker with a turbulent history. Carter's team unearthed a sequence of acrimonious text exchanges between Amanda and Sarah in the weeks preceding the murder. In one particularly harsh dispute, Amanda accused Sarah of attempting to undermine her marriage, while Sarah retorted, labeling her mother a pitiful, envious old woman. These digital clues seemed to substantiate the notion of a family dynamic that had reached a critical juncture. Further arousing suspicion was Amanda's conduct following Sarah's death. While initially devastated, she swiftly became defensive and evasive during interrogations. Her alibi for the night of the murder was feeble. She asserted that she had been home alone watching television, with no one to substantiate her account. A search of the Wilson residence revealed a diary concealed in Amanda's bedside table. Entries chronicled her escalating resentment towards Sarah, bemoaning the girl's attractiveness and the attention she garnered from Robert. One unsettling passage stated, "Sometimes I wish she would just vanish. Our lives would be so much better without her constant presence, her judging eyes." The case against Amanda appeared to gain momentum when a neighbor reported observing her return home in the early hours of the morning on the day Sarah's body was found. Amanda had no justification for this late-night outing, claiming she must have been sleepwalking, a condition she had never mentioned before. As circumstantial evidence accumulated, Carter experienced mounting pressure from his superiors and the media to apprehend the culprit. The community, paralyzed by fear, demanded justice for Sarah. Amanda Wilson, once an object of sympathy, transformed into the focus of public animosity and suspicion. Carter, despite his escalating conviction of Amanda's guilt, couldn't suppress a lingering doubt. Something about her desperation and trepidation during interrogations didn't correspond with the calculated killer he believed had perpetrated this crime. Nonetheless, with the evidence in hand, he prepared to make an arrest. On a drizzling Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after Sarah's body was discovered, Amanda Wilson was taken into custody. As she was escorted from her residence in handcuffs, she vehemently proclaimed her innocence, her pleas reverberating through the shocked neighborhood. Robert Wilson observed from the doorway, his expression inscrutable, as his wife was placed in the back of a police vehicle. Little did Carter suspect that, in his quest for justice, he had been deceived by a masterfully executed deception, allowing the genuine killer to conceal his tracks. The case against Amanda Wilson appeared irrefutable, yet Detective Michael Carter couldn't suppress the sensation that something was awry. It was a minor detail, easily disregarded, that ultimately directed him toward the truth. While examining security footage from establishments near the Wilson home, Carter noticed Robert's vehicle departing his office parking lot much earlier than he had asserted on the night of the murder. Intrigued by this inconsistency, Carter chose to delve deeper into Robert Wilson's life. He re-interviewed Robert's colleagues and clients, focusing more closely on the man's activities and connections. It was during a discussion with Robert's assistant that Carter discovered a vital piece of information. Robert had been making frequent, unexplained visits to a coffee shop across town, always during his lunch hour. Surveillance of the coffee shop unveiled a startling revelation. Robert was regularly meeting with Elena Gonzalez, his neighbor's wife. The two exhibited a familiarity that surpassed mere friendly, neighborly interactions. Carter had exposed Robert's clandestine affair. Armed with this new information, Carter approached Elena for another interview. Confronted with evidence of the affair, Elena succumbed, disclosing the extent of her relationship with Robert. They had been involved for over a year, stealing moments together whenever they could. Elena, consumed with guilt, confessed that she had lied in her previous statement to safeguard Robert. The affair cast Robert's alibi for the night of the murder in a new light. Elena confirmed that they had indeed met that evening, contradicting Robert's claim of working late. This disclosure shattered the meticulously crafted timeline Robert had provided. As Carter investigated further into the relationship between Robert and Elena, He exposed a network of lies and secret meetings. Bank records indicated that Robert had recently inquired about transferring substantial sums of money offshore. Email exchanges suggested plans for a new life together, away from their spouses and obligations. Detective Carter now confronted a disturbing query. Could Robert Wilson, the bereaved stepfather, truly be Sarah's murderer? The motive remained obscure, but the flaws in Robert's immaculate facade began to surface. Carter understood that he had been so engrossed in Amanda's case that he had nearly overlooked the genuine narrative unfolding right before his eyes. The decisive moment in the investigation emerged from an unanticipated source. Sarah's closest companion, Emily Chen, approached Detective Carter with a small, leather-bound journal, Sarah's personal diary. Emily, overwhelmed with guilt, confessed that she had initially concealed the diary, fearing it might mar Sarah's reputation. However, as suspicion mounted against Amanda, Emily recognized that the truth held greater importance than safeguarding her friend's secrets. Carter devoted a sleepless night to scrutinizing Sarah's intimate reflections. The diary depicted a vivid image of a young woman grappling with a horrifying revelation. In entries dating several months back, Sarah chronicled her mounting suspicion that her stepfather was engaged in an extramarital affair. She detailed observing fleeting text messages, eavesdropping on hushed telephone conversations, and noticing Robert's progressively unpredictable demeanor. The most incriminating entry surfaced merely 3 days preceding Sarah's murder. In tremulous handwriting, she recounted following Robert one evening and witnessing him in a tender embrace with Elena Gonzalez. Sarah expressed her revulsion and betrayal, uncertain about whether to confront Robert or inform her mother. This disclosure offered the missing component of the puzzle. Sarah had uncovered Robert's affair, providing a clear motive for murder. Robert, a man who had constructed his life on meticulously preserving appearances, faced the risk of losing everything: his marriage, his standing, and his financial security. Equipped with this new information, Carter revisited the forensic evidence. He requested a more meticulous examination of Sarah's attire, specifically searching for trace evidence that might have been disregarded. The findings were enlightening. Fibers discovered on Sarah's jacket corresponded with those from a rare wool blend utilized in Robert's costly suits. Furthermore, a re-evaluation of Sarah's phone records indicated a series of calls to Robert's office number on the day of her disappearance. The calls were brief, implying Sarah might have been attempting to confront her stepfather or schedule a meeting. Carter also uncovered that Robert had acquired a hunting knife from a local sporting goods store just a week before the murder. The knife, conspicuously absent from the Wilson residence, matched the type of weapon believed to have been employed in the crime. As the components aligned, Carter comprehended the magnitude of Robert's deception. He had not only manipulated his family and community, but had also expertly diverted the entire investigation towards Amanda. The detective experienced a blend of admiration for Robert's craftiness and revulsion at his ruthless actions. With escalating evidence implicating Robert Wilson as the murderer, Carter recognized the urgency to act swiftly. The man who had once been esteemed as a pillar of the community was now exposed as a calculating killer, prepared to sacrifice his stepdaughter to safeguard his secrets. Detective Carter resolved to confront Robert Wilson at his office, distant from the inquisitive eyes of neighbors and the media that had been encamped outside the Wilson residence. As Carter and his partner entered the luxurious surroundings of Robert's financial advisory firm, they discovered him in the midst of a client consultation, the epitome of professional decorum. In a voice barely audible, Robert commenced speaking. He recounted Sarah confronting him in the woods, menacing to reveal his affair to Amanda and Elena's husband. He depicted the panic that seized him, the dread of forfeiting everything he had strived for. With tears cascading down his face, Robert narrated how he had struck out in desperation, silencing Sarah indefinitely. The admission flowed from him, a deluge of guilt and self-contempt. Robert detailed how he had meticulously devised a plan to incriminate Amanda, exploiting the known frictions between stepmother and stepdaughter. As Carter apprehended him, Robert's sole plea was a fractured entreaty. "Don't tell Elena, please don't let her know what I've done." The once proud man was escorted out of his office in handcuffs, his life disintegrating around him as the reality of his deeds ultimately emerged. Following a 2-week trial and mere hours of deliberation, the jury returned with a guilty verdict on all charges, including first-degree murder. The judge, referencing the savage nature of the crime and Robert's calculated attempts to mislead investigators, condemned him to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Justice had been administered, but for those whose lives had been devastated by Robert's actions, the injuries would require far longer to mend. Ultimately, the case of Robert Wilson serves as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable loss, the relentless pursuit of justice, and the enduring power of a young woman's voice, even when silenced, to ultimately unveil the truth.